Hey, this is Joe from the Recording Revolution. I'm excited about this video. Just got a little bit of goosebumps because I think this is going to be an aha moment for a lot of people when it comes to compression. Compression can be really confusing, and even when you think you understand it, there might be a piece of it that you've got backwards or wrong. And if you get this one specific setting wrong, it can kind of ruin the entire rest of the compression process. So we're going to talk about that today with some visual aids. It's going to be really fun. But first, if you don't have a mixing process and you haven't checked out my free 5-step mix guide, you need to check it out right now. Pause the video, head over to recordingrevolution.com/5-step mix. Enter your email. I'll send you the guide. It's just a couple of pages long, but it gives you a framework in which to apply all the stuff that you learn on this channel. Everything I teach applies to a certain step of that framework, and that framework helps you know where to start, where you are, and how to get to the finish line quickly and efficiently, and obviously get amazing sounding results. So go to that link, get your free guide, read that, but first let's dive into this video and find out what this weird secret component is. Let's do a quick 60-second overview of compression just to make sure we're all on the same page. Most compressors have 5 components to them, and you could think of compression like a Venus flytrap, that little plant that eats flies. The first setting is the threshold. This is when a signal crosses a certain level, I want you to start compressing, Mr. Compressor. Or when the fly gets this far into your mouth, I want you to chomp down on it, okay? That's the threshold. It's the threshold, right, above which we're going to start compressing. Second setting is the ratio. This says how aggressive are we going to compress it once it starts compressing. So kind of how hard are we going to squish that fly once it's inside? This is getting weird. Third setting is the attack setting. This is how quickly the compressor clamps down. Does it do it instantly, or is it kind of a slow burn? The attack setting helps us do that. The next setting is the release setting. This is the other side of the attack setting. When the signal drops below the threshold, when the compressor starts to let go, how quickly does it let go? Does it go bam, or does it slowly let go of the dead fly? This is falling apart. And the fifth step, the fifth setting that's going to be on there is some sort of makeup gain. Sometimes it's just called gain, volume. This just allows us, if we've reduced the volume of the signal, this allows us to bring it back up so that the before and after sounds are fairly similar volume-wise. Okay, so that's the quick overview. So which of those 5 settings would you say is the most important? Or which would you say is the most overlooked and the most important? Tell you what, leave a comment with your guess, and then I'll answer my answer to that question in just a second. We've got threshold, ratio, attack, release, makeup gain. Which of these do you think I'm going to focus on today? Leave a comment below. You can go back and edit your comment and make yourself look like a genius later. All right, here's my answer in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's this one, right there. It's the release setting. So of these 5 settings, I think the release setting is one of the most important, if not the most important setting, because if you get it wrong, it kind of wreaks havoc on your entire thing you're trying to compress. If it's too fast, it does wonky things. If it's too slow, it does wonky things. Let me show you what I mean with a little bit of a visual aid. For this example, let's use a kick drum. And I know the questions will come. What app is this? This is actually one of those remarkable tablets. It's got a feature where it can show what I'm writing on the screen. That's what's happening. So let's say we have a kick drum. What does a kick drum waveform look like? Let's draw it. It's got a big kind of transient here, and then it kind of dies off like that, right? So it's loud, and then it gets softer, right? A lot of drum waveforms look something like this, okay? Now, to help us kind of visualize this further, what sound does a kick drum make? This is going to be really helpful. A kick drum makes this sound. A kick drum goes boom, okay? Boom. Now, where do the components of the word boom show up here? Well, the first part of it is kind of right in here. The B is right there. So there's essentially kind of 2 components to a kick drum. There's the B, the tick, the click, the first part of the kick itself, and the second half is the And the is like everything else, okay? So you got the B here and then the Okay, so stick with me for a second. There's 2 components to a kick drum. When we start compressing a kick drum, we start to mess with the relationship between the B and the And we can actually change that quite a bit. So if we were to compress with a really fast attack time, we could do something like this. Maybe the attack time is really chopping off a part of that buh, and so now the buh is quieter, and then maybe the is louder. So instead of being boom, it's more like boom, right? So that initial just transient of the kick drum gets brought down. Now let's say we have a really slow release time. That means the compressor is going to clamp down, and it's going to continue clamping down on everything else until that release time lets up. So the waveform starts to look something like this, or maybe even this, okay? So it compressed with a pretty fast attack, but then the release was slow, so we didn't hear, like this section right here, we didn't hear as much. So we've essentially taken the boom way down, or maybe we've taken this O out and we're just kind of hearing the at the end. Conversely, if we change the setting of the release, we might have it release really quickly, which means it compresses, and maybe this is the threshold, and then the release just lets back up. So the waveform might look something like this. Once you factor in our makeup gain, the buh got turned down, but the is now pretty heavily emphasized. And we can have lots of variations in between based on where we set that release setting. So here are a couple examples. The kick drum by itself, we've seen kind of a typical kind of triangular waveform. If we go with a really slow release on our kick, on that compressor, then it typically is going to look like this. You'll have the spike there, but then because the release is so slow, you don't have much else of a sound. So all this loudness that comes after a kick, think about a kick drum sound, it goes boom. If we compress it really quickly up front, it goes boom. And then all the is being turned down, is being compressed because this release time is just refusing to let go. So over time, the release lets go, but also over time, the volume of the kick goes down. So the net result is you have a real clicky front end of the kick drum and not much else. You just kind of hear kick, right? On the other end of that, we could have the same attack, but then if we had a nice quick release, so the release lets go really soon, then all of this sound comes back in. And so here we're hearing boom, and here we're hearing boom. And we can change the relationship between those two by how we adjust that release setting. So this made sense to my brain. I hope it makes sense to you. Another way to think about the release knob is think of it as a tone knob. So if I'm compressing a kick drum and I've got the amount of compression that I want, but I'd like to add in more or less of the resonance of the kick drum. So maybe instead of it being boom, it becomes boom or boom or boom, but not boom, right? Kick drums, I almost dropped it. Kick drums tend to resonate like that, right? So the release, if we get the front end sounding like we want, it's punching us in the face just like we want it to. The release allows us to kind of tame and figure out what is this hand motion, what that low end, what that back end of the waveform is doing. And so if we want a nice and punchy kick drum, we might go with a longer release. See, I even have to think about it because it feels backwards. Longer release time means it's going to wait before letting the rest of the kick sound back in. So a long release time means the kick goes boom, boom, boom. That might be perfect for one song. If it's a big rockin' song and you want it to be more like, When the Levee Breaks and a big kind of boomy kick drum, then you might go with a faster release time that lets it go boom, 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 right? It has this big woof to it. It's a really interesting approach. And this can work on the kick drum itself or even on the entire kit. If you have a compressor on your entire drum kit, mess with the release time and listen to what it does. It's going to basically bring in more or less of the kind of the general ambience of the kit itself. Each drum has its own kind of resonance. There's a little bit of room sound in there. And as you mess with the release, you actually mess with how dry or how open the drums sound. It's fascinating. And rather than play it for you myself and have you kind of leaning in on YouTube, trying to see if you hear what I'm talking about, I encourage you to go do this for yourself. pull up a drum kit and mess with the compressor, specifically the release knob, and listen to what happens. I promise you, if you do enough of these types of exercises, compression will open up all new doors of tones to you that weren't available to you before. I mentioned my 5-step mix guide at the beginning of this video. I've got another resource. If you don't have any drum tracks to try this on, that's understandable, right? Go to recordingrevolution.com/MT for Mix Together. This is a series of YouTube videos, actually 3 seasons of me walking through a mix, and at least 2 of them have drum tracks included. So go pull those in. You can mix the songs if you want, or just pull in the drum tracks to do this exercise. But you can get that at recordingrevolution.com/MT. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.